Now these first invaders would be brought under some kind of control, and that would be 1,000 years of peace, and then they would start coming again from Western Asia, the Assyrians, now called Syrians, the Iranians, then called Persians, then a Greek called Alexander. Some people thought he was great, but for what, I don't know.
The shameful end to his 31-year reign foreshadowed troubled and chaotic times for Egypt.
After Ramses III and his successors, you get this period of political breakup and social stress. There are still Egyptian pharaohs, but they seem to be much less in control of the situation. You have the country itself dividing up into several kingdoms with several pharaohs ruling at the same time.
Scholars suggest that Egypt was failing for yet another reason.
Egypt is no longer confined to the narrow, safe valley of the Nile. There are other great empires rising, not least, of course, over in Assyria, and we're into the last 1,000 years BC. So the whole thing is a state of flux. So Egypt is no longer top of the pile, top dog, and she is suffering.
Over the next 800 years, nearly 70 rulers from 11 new dynasties would govern Egypt. They included Libyan, Nubian, Syrian, and Persian conquerors. Egypt was under the domination of the Persians when in the year 333 BC, they were compelled to face one of the most formidable military commanders in history, Alexander the Great.
Here come the first known European in the continent of Africa, in Egypt, known to us today as Alexander the Greek. At that point, after that, those Greeks came into Egypt and in other parts of Africa. After Alexander came in, then other Europeans out of the Slavic areas of Europe, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, Albania, Hungary, etc., came into the continent of Africa. Okay, they are known in history as the Parthians, etc., etc. The Europeans, after Alexander the Greek and the other Europeans coming thereafter, and the Ptolemies, who ruled Egypt after the death of Alexander, who died in 323, the Ptolemies took over the rule of Egypt.
Now, when I'm showing you right here, these is the cartouches on the Ptolemaic temples, the temples that were constructed under the Greeks and the Romans. Now, what is significant about that, now these temples were built by the African priests, but the one thing that they did, they left them cartouches blank. Why did they leave the cartouches blank? Because they sending us the knowledge that they did not respect the Greeks or the Romans that had conquered our land. That right there lets us know. When you go to the walls and you see our divine African kings and queens, you'll see the metal now carved in the cartouches, which they call a chenu. Okay? That one right there is blank. So I'm going to continue to show. Right here, they're blank. They're blank for a reason. Because they did not accept the conquerors as the true kings and royalty that should be ruling in Africa. They let us know. They left signs and symbols for us to always remember.
Alexander's invasion was the first purely European invasion of Africa. Everything that had happened in Egypt and in Africa before 332 BC was something that no European had anything to do with. Now we see the beginning of European occupation, and we see it as aggression, not bringing civilization, but destroying civilizations that it did not understand.
The Egyptians kept the Greeks out for all that long. They only came through conquests. They were never allowed in. If you read the Stolen Legacy, it will tell you that the Egyptians blocked the Greeks from ever coming into Egypt until it was conquered by the Persians. And then that's when they came in. Other than that, the Africans kept them motherfuckers over there. They did not let them in. And you must remember that. See, these is off the tombs of our ancestors. This is when the Asians come in. And when they, even though our brothers and sisters was building these tombs to let us know they didn't care a damn thing about them, you see the cartouches are blank. They didn't respect them. You had to go through the mystery system 42 years. No, 40. From 7 to 47. And it was a secret language. Indeed it was. Another cartouche. When the Asians came in, here you go, some more empty cartouches. So that you know, all of them is Greeks and Romans. That's original material. That's what our ancestors left for us. They did not respect the foreigners. They did not get any knowledge about alchemy. Because if they did, they wouldn't be asking why and how. They wouldn't know. Now these is you can tell, these is the Greco-Romans. These are what you find down in Lower Kemet. Okay? See that? We ain't rocking no shit like that. And look at the blue eyes and shit. You can tell them. You understand what I'm saying? So they hide that from us. They hide that from us. They don't make the comparisons like that. So you can see the difference between the European. Now, when the Greeks came into Egypt, where did they set up? They set up right there on the Mediterranean at Alexandria. Why did they do that? Because the Africans hated their ass. They couldn't come down south. Now these is you can tell, these is the Greco-Romans. These are what you find down in Lower Kemet. Okay? See that? We ain't rocking no shit like that. And look at the blue eyes and shit. You can tell them. You understand what I'm saying? So they hide that from us. They don't make the comparisons like that. So you can see the difference between the European. Now these is you can tell, these is the Greco-Romans. These are what you find down in Lower Kemet. Okay? See that? We ain't rocking no shit like that. And look at the blue eyes and shit. You can tell them. You understand what I'm saying? So they hide that from us. They don't make the comparisons like that. So you can see the difference between the European. Now these is you can tell, these is the Greco-Romans. These are what you find down in Lower Kemet. Okay? See that? We You ain't rocking no shit like that. And look at the blue eyes and shit. You can tell them. You understand what I'm saying? So they hide that from us. They don't make the comparisons like that. So you can see the difference between the European. Now these is you can tell these is the Greco-Romans. These are what you find down in Lower Kemet. Okay? See that? You ain't rocking no shit like that. And look at the blue eyes and shit. You can tell them. You understand what I'm saying? So they hide that from us. They don't make the comparisons like that. So you can see the difference between the European. See that? You ain't rocking no shit like that. And look at the blue eyes and shit. You can tell them. You understand what I'm saying? Now these is you can tell these is the Greco-Romans. These are what you find down in Lower Kemet. Okay? See that? You ain't rocking no shit like that. And look at the blue eyes and shit. You can tell them. You understand what I'm saying? So they hide that from us. They don't make the comparisons like that. So you can see the difference between the European.
The artwork convinces Zahi that the site is from one of the least documented eras, the Greek and Roman period. At the tail end of ancient Egypt in the 4th century BC, a new era began. Alexander the Great swept through Egypt, bringing more than 3 centuries of Greek rule, which only ended with the dramatic suicide of Queen Cleopatra as Roman legions advanced. The Romans then ruled for almost 4 centuries. Both Greeks and Romans picked up on Egyptian culture, building temples in the ancient fashion, portraying their rulers as pharaohs. Oases like Bahariya were the breadbaskets of those empires, growing dates and grapes for export to faraway Rome and Athens. Soldiers built garrisons across the desert and manned forts to keep these trade routes open.
The Greeks' rule didn't last that long before they were challenged. An ambitious and well-dressed bunch of thugs across the ocean not very educated, but they could fight like hell, called Romans, began to have ambition for the trade in the Mediterranean. Now, the Roman Empire internally was not very rich. Africa became the breadbasket for the Roman Empire. And except for Africa, the Roman Empire would not have been able to sustain itself. Now, the Roman presence in North Africa is going to force into being one of the great events in human history. Roman taxation, Roman oppression would cause people to turn to new gods and question old gods.
The Greco-Roman period is very dark to us, especially in Egypt. The great mystery of these excavations are the tombs that we're excavating, Greek tombs or Roman tombs.
But much of the sadness here lies hidden behind beautiful masks, adorned with images of the dead.
I can see with each mummy that each one has realistic face, representing the same person. Because that is the face that he is going to be in the afterlife, and therefore it should be preserved. This is typical type of a lady that she died before she get married, and therefore they put her as if she is going to meet the groom.
And the mask here is in very good condition, and we think that he is a 7 years old boy or 6 years old boy.
I looked at each mummy here. I can see something different, and each mummy can tell us the story. You see now this shape is completely Greek, but this shape is Roman. This is like treasure to us. That tells us now that this cemetery started in the Greek period, continued until the Roman period, but the majority of the mummies that we discover are dated to the Roman period.
Both Greeks and Romans picked up on Egyptian culture, building temples in the ancient fashion, portraying their rulers as pharaohs.
Herodotus blatantly stated that the Greeks got all 12 of their gods from the Egyptians. If it was a lie, he could have corrected that right then and there and showed you and just said, no, that can't be possible. But what he said was that everything that the Egyptians told him, they proved to him. That's Herodotus. An ancient Greek historian lived around the 5th century BC. Might have lived, might not have lived. Okay? You got to check this shit. You go read Stolen Legacy. That's what George M. James said, that a lot of these names is created because they still in books. And they got to put somebody's name on the sheet, okay? Half of them, you can't even, nobody know where they was born. Nobody know who their mammy and daddy was, okay? What kind of shit is this, man? Y'all giving these men all this damn credit, you understand what I'm saying? And nobody know the origins of these people. But when you see the Greeks really establish some shit, it was in Alexandria. It was not on, it wasn't in Greece. It was in Alexandria when they came to Egypt, because they were stealing all the damn information that they could. And they took all of the various libraries, because every temple had a library. So they sacked all the libraries and took all the scrolls and put it in one building and let the goddamn building burn down. Let the building burn down. It was the most devastating thing that probably happened in our history. because we lost so much. He is regarded as the father of European history. I don't know why they keep saying it. And again, so when he went in, let me give you some of the things, because I got the text. This is Herodotus. And Herodotus lived right around the 5th century BCE. And 484 BC to 425 BC. He was born in the region of what you call Turkey today. And he's the first European to put together what we call a history book. They ain't got none before him. Y'all need to know that. He was the first white historian known to collect his materials systematically, test their accuracy to a certain extent, and arrange them in a well-constructed and vivid narrative. Now, right there, what you need to know about that, that's the first white man. Okay? So if you catch a white man discussing history before this motherfucker, ask him what white man did the research. You understand? You can't let a people extend their influence further than when they can document they've been on this planet. So the white man could try to explain Egypt, but then if he got enough knowledge to explain Egypt, why they ain't got no damn history before this right here? Why they ain't got no books? You see what I'm saying? Herodotus. He went into Egypt, and if you get his book, it's the second book of his histories. It's called Herodotus, Histories. And the second book is called Euripides. And that's where he basically discusses Egypt as he's seen Egypt around 450 BC. Now, I scanned some of the valuable information up out of the book. I'm going to continue to do it as much as possible so that I can get a lot of the main points that Herodotus brings up when he goes into Egypt. Now, this is what he says. The Egyptians, they went on to affirm, first brought into use the names of the 12 gods, which the Greeks adopted from them, and first erected altars, images, and temples to God, and also first engraved upon stone the figure of animals. Okay then, so right then and there, 450 BCE, it was carved down, deep down in the mind of all Europeans, Greeks, that they had received their religion from the Africans, primarily the Egyptians and the Ethiopians, and that they were the first to bring into altars, images, and temples to the gods. Before then, there's nobody that could document that they got a system that we know of today called religion that involve all of these attributes of a religion, altar, images, and temples to the god. Now listen what he says. I highlighted that. In most of the cases, they proved to me that what they said was true. So the white boy went there in 450 BC and he documents exactly what the Egyptians, the Africans told him, and they put the shit on the table and worked it out right in front of his face. They proved to him that the things that they was telling him was true. So here it is, the white boy in 450 BC tells us exactly what he saw.
The first concept of triangulation. Triangulation, was that attributed to Pythagoras? We're going to answer all these questions here in a minute. As you see, geometry means the measure of land. Ain't no Greeks measure no land over there in those mountains up there on Mount Olympus. This is where the earth measurement starts here. Pythagoras studied for 22 years in Kemet. Read Plutarch on Osiris and Isis. The Egyptians measured everything. We were obsessed with measurement and mathematics. You can see here the brothers measuring the gold. Now white folks measuring the gold. Measured everything. Even the soul, the heart, was weighed on a scale, on the balance. You had to come before Tahuti thought, and your heart had to be just and true. They weighed everything. Everything was dealing with mathematics and sciences. Here you can see the area of a circle. How many of you knew that they were involved in the area of mathematics? How many of you knew that? The area of a circle. Look at the Orion mathematical papyrus here. the area of the circle, the area of a square. Rhine mathematical papyrus. We move on, and then after they figured out the area of the triangles, they built triangles. Right there, and then they tell us Pythagoras was the father of the law of triangulation, which they called and named it after him, Pythagorean theorem. And we got triangles sitting right there, the biggest triangle you ever saw. They can't see it. We move on, and here you can see the volume of pyramids, the volume of truncated pyramids. Here they are, square numbers. Square numbers. Now, what's the basis for Pythagoras' theorem? Isn't it square roots? Isn't it square numbers? Here's the basis of it, the squaring of numbers. This is the Berlin papyrus here, the Moscow papyrus rather. So don't say Brother Matthew is making this stuff up, that Brother Matthew can't subject his passion to reason. As you can see, Pythagoras coming into Kemet, where he studied for 20, he said it himself. He studied for 22 years in Kemet. Then he went and studied 16 years in Mesopotamia and went back to Greece and started a school of mathematics. Then they said he was the father of the theorem. Just like they said Hippocrates was the father of medicine. You saw Imhotep. They made him the god of medicine. And the only first thing you hear of Hippocrates, he's in Egypt studying medicine.
See the triangles? Long before Pythagoras. You okay? So don't come in here with that. You need to, so you can go look that up, almost papyrus, and look it up and teach it to your babies. Long before some goddamn Pythagoras, when his story opened, he opened up. He in Kemet. Just like Dr. Ben said, you never heard of none of the philosophers until they was coming home from Kemet. You never heard of their ass before they went. You never heard of them before they went. Thales, Plato, all them thieves. You understand? They know they weren't supposed to write that shit down. But when they came home, they wanted to be known. They wanted to be known, and they wrote that knowledge down. They had no business writing that damn knowledge down. And that's the way they was able to steal it, if you read in the Stolen Legacy. They was the first ones that broke the code. That's right. They only gave them a little bit. And I was watching some shit on TV, and they was talking about the Pythagorean theorem, but they was showing all the damn triangles in the pyramid. How the hell you gonna show it in the pyramid before Pythagoras? Everybody coming up out of Egypt. You understand what I'm saying? Herodotus coming up out of Egypt. Moses coming up out of Egypt. Abraham coming up out of Egypt. Pythagoras coming up out of Egypt. All of these peoples they do not get any type of religious being religiously esteemed unless they got a connection to Egypt.
Both Greeks and Romans picked up on Egyptian culture, building temples in the ancient fashion, portraying their rulers as pharaohs. Both Greeks and Romans picked up on Egyptian culture, building temples in the ancient fashion, portraying their rulers as pharaohs.
On the left is the Greco-Romans living in Egypt. On the right, an indigenous Egyptians. Why didn't the Greeks paint themselves the same color as the Egyptians? You can clearly see the difference